So Andre is going to start by reading a bit from Call Me By Your Name. So
It's a short passage. And one of the things that I have to do it, but it is very difficult to do it after I heard Michael Stuhlbarg in the film read the exact same passage. So the author is nothing close to what a great actor can do with such a passage. But I wrote this passage, and what I love about the film, and it gratified me no end, is that the film scriptwriter, the screenwriter, who was James Ivory, kept the speech almost verbatim, which they never do, so I was very happy. Anyway, this is a speech that the father gives to the son. "Fear not," said the father, "it will come. At least I hope it does. And when you least expect it, nature has cunning ways of finding our weakest spot. Just remember, I am here. Right now, you may not want to feel anything. Perhaps you never wished to feel anything. And perhaps it's not with me that you'll want to speak about these things. But feel something you did." And the son thinks. I looked at him. This was the moment I should lie and tell him he was totally off course. "Look, I envy you," said the father. "In my place, most parents would hope the whole thing goes away, or pray that their son lands on his feet again, and that's more or less enough for them. But I am not such a parent. In your place, if there is pain, nurse it. And if there is a flame, don't snuff it out. Sorry, I'm reading ahead of myself. Don't be brutal with the pain, which is something we all do with our pain. Withdrawal can be a terrible thing when it keeps us awake at night, and watching others forget us sooner than we'd want to be forgotten is no better. We rip out so much of ourselves to be cured of things faster than we should. Then we go bankrupt by the time we're 30 and have less to offer each time we start with somebody else. But to feel nothing so as to feel nothing, what a waste." And that is the philosophy of the father.
Thank you, Andre. You actually read really well. If you hear me read, it's like a corpse. So you did really well. This was actually one of my favorite parts of the book, because what does every child look from a parent except acceptance for who they are, which is, I think, the crux of what you were talking about.
Yes.
And I mean, I think as a parent myself and as a child of my mother, you're always kind of trying to be better than who you are, both as a parent and as a child.
Yes.
And that's inevitably an act. And the way the father accepts him, the way he is really beautiful. But my question here is is this an ideal world? Because parents will nitpick children, children will nitpick parents. Is this an outlier parent?
It is an unusual parent, but at the same time, it is what every parent would have loved to do to their child, to accept the child as the child is. But more to the point, I think, is that we ourselves never accept who we are, and we don't even like who we are. And so one of the things that I've learned in life is that when a relationship is over before its time, which is really its time,
Yes.
is that we have to find a way to resolve it in ourselves as fast as possible. And so we kill it. We learn to hate the person that we used to love.
You know, that's actually really interesting, because I think this was in Find Me, so I'm jumping to the sequel. You wrote about, sorry, I'm going to read it out. I suspect that we have first selves, second selves, perhaps third, fourth, fifth, etc. You know, this really resonated with me, because I'm certainly on at least self number 4 myself.
Okay.
So, you know, when you say we started hating the person, inevitably, maybe the view we should have is this person was right for my first self and this person was right for my second self. But of course, jealousy, love, they don't allow for that kind of thing, do they?
No, I think that every relationship, because it involves two individuals, is already in difficulty. because we don't get along with ourselves. So how could we possibly get along with somebody else? So there is a kind of term end to a relationship, which may not be the case in most cases, but the way I've seen it is that relationships are fraught from the very beginning. And so we don't notice how they're fraught. And at some point, when the other person says it's over, or we say it's over, we want to forget this other person and be rid of them because we want to move on. And what the father is saying here is, don't need to move on. Stay where you are because there is something that's holding you there. Don't change the narrative.
You know, I think one of the most interesting things you said for the Indian context is there are two people in a relationship. For us, that's the ideal. There's your mother-in-law, there's your father-in-law, there's your cousins, there's your children. So this is entirely culturally, obviously something very different in other places. But, you know, back to Call Me By Your Name, I believe you wrote it in 3 to 4 months, right?
Yes.
That is amazing, you know. How did that happen so quickly? A lot of you must have been in the book for that. You know, I mean, there can't be a lot of research there. It has to be something already inside you. And
actually, no. No, because I'm a fiction writer.
yes.
And fiction writers basically take whatever they've experienced and they alter it, sometimes totally, to fit the needs of the narrative that they're creating. But I came to Call Me By Your Name because I was writing another book that was extremely difficult to write. It is actually my favorite novel, but it is a difficult one that took a few years to write. And so at some point I said, enough, I can't do this. So I stopped writing it. I decided I'm going to write something totally different, something easy. And I wrote Call Me By Your Name. And then I said, okay, after 3 months, because it's the end of summer, I'm going to go back to the old one, which I did. And I finished the other novel. But in the meanwhile, this other book took off by itself. I thought that nobody would want to publish it, but they published it. And it became a movie. And then the next thing I know, it became a very, very successful movie. And that's the end of that. So
Yeah, like you said, it really did take off. You know, seeing your characters on screen like that and giving you the vision of the characters you had in your head to somebody else, how did it feel to see them on screen? Did they live up to what you had? Like, were those the people you saw in your mind's eye?
I don't remember because the characters, the actors in the film took over so that I could no longer remember who are the people that I had in mind when I wrote the book. I see the characters as the movie actors.
So now is that how you see them? Like,
yes, I can.
If today you looked at them in your mind's eye, it is the movie.
It is the movie. I only think of the movie. It's very much like when you're going to visit a friend's house that you've never visited before. You imagine their house somehow, and then you go to visit the house, and it's totally different. And now you can no longer remember what the house was that you imagined.
Yes.
You only have a picture of the place that you visited.
Or like when you get married, the marriage you imagined, and then where you
forget
planned it up. Just saying.
I hope your husband is not close.
Oh, he's very far away. Yeah. No, but the New Yorker called you an acute grammarian of desire. No pressure there. Have your views of love transformed over time? Because over the 2 books, I see 2 different Andres in the Find Me is written, 15 years later, maybe?
Yes, 15 years later. I've grown older. But I've also think that the characters have grown older, so that my most recent book, which you know nothing about because it hasn't come out in the States in a book, it came out as an audible. It's about 2 people who are in their middle 60s falling in love.
Well, that's amazing.
Well, yes, it's a man and a woman. They meet in the jury selection hall, and they become friendly, and they fall in love. But basically, I like to change the age of my character. So I grew from adolescence. I wrote about childhood. I wrote about adolescence, about middle age. Find Me is all about middle age. And then I finished a book on 2 people in the middle 60s. I might go back to adolescence. It all depends on what it's in my gut that I want to write.
Yeah, because one of the things that the new book is about 2 people who meet at jury duty.
Yes.
Here they meet and Find Me in a train station.
In a train
station.
So
a meeting of chance is very big in your work, isn't it?
Yes.
There are people who are not in each other's spheres normally, is what I would take away from that.
Well, I mean, if you take, for example, the typical narrative in a conservative country,
Right.
in a very conservative country, usually you have the parents arranging the marriage.
Yes.
I think that happens to a lot of people. They have arranged the marriage, so you don't even have to think about it. I like to take that formula out of the equation and to create a situation where two individuals who did not, in fact, plan to meet suddenly are jostled together, and either they're going to hate each other or become totally indifferent, or, as might happen, they find that there's a desire to know the other person better. And I love when one of my characters decides that this person is really, as we like to say, which is a cliche, interesting. Which I think is a key word, by the way. It's not that much of a flat-footed term that we use for everything.
So just tell me, I mean, this is very, I'm getting somewhere with this. Are mobile phones allowed, smartphones allowed in the jury duty hall or not?
They are allowed.
They are allowed.
You cannot receive phone calls and you cannot speak on them because people tend to be very loud. No, you're not allowed to, but you can certainly get texts.
Because, where I'm getting with this is, this kind of love in the age of distraction, when everybody's kind of in their phones and you don't absorb anything around you.
Right.
So how is it writing a book with the kind of distractions we have? And what do you think it changes for readers? Because of, to keep somebody hooked when they have, I don't know, doom scrolling on Twitter, it's a different thing than before, right?
It is very different. And,
Yeah.
and I haven't quite figured it out because I'm not intimate with all these social media. I don't use them that often. I get emails, which is the extent of my response
So
time.
I shouldn't tag you in 200 photos today? No? Just asking.
No, people do
Note to Team Works Art, do not tag him in 200 photos. Sorry, yeah, back to you. Yeah.
No, but it's a kind of thing. People are no longer focused on each other because they have distractions.
Yes.
But I'm not so sure that that's such a bad thing. We assume it's bad because we're not focused on the other person, but in fact, we're never focused on the other person.
You don't think?
I don't think so. I think that we're more focused on ourselves.
There, I would agree. But, so sort of staying with this for a bit, I mean, when you write a story of love today, and I think even in the beginning of Find Me, Miranda's on her smartphone. And she's looking down at messages at some point.
There are smartphones in Find Me, yes.
And, has the mystery kind of gone from love? Because if you like somebody, you could imagine a lot of things about them. Now you can stalk them on Instagram, see like 20 photos of them, their friends. So the way you perceive a new person is totally different. Is there like mystery left in the person?
I do believe that you can stalk someone. I don't mean stalking in the ugly word.
Of course, me neither.
You can stalk somebody to try to find out what their personal lives is like, who they are, where do they work, what do they do. And in fact, in one of the stories in Find Me, there is a character who wants to find out about another character and tracks him down on the internet and finds out that this person is a teacher and so on and so forth, which is something that we might do if we're that interested. But at the same time, that's not a distraction. That, in fact, furthers the obsession.
And also it gives you the opportunity to put the best part of you, or what you think is the best part of you, airbrushing, stuff.
Yes.
So maybe it can actually maintain the mystery till you meet the person.
Well, basically, if you met somebody after meeting them online, you probably will be disappointed.
Yeah. And you know what? Again, this is going really off topic, but my friends who are on, well, I won't say Tinder, that's not the right one, but the dating app where you actually date people, apparently it's more exhausting than old-fashioned dating because you have to be cute and send messages for like days on an end.
Oh.
And then on Thursday evenings, if somebody asks you on a Thursday evening, you cannot go on a Saturday. All these rules of new love, which you and I do not know much about.
I know nothing
and
about
I'm grateful for that personally. Call Me By Your Name, back to going forward from that, it's a story of unrequited love, right? That's what it is. And, had the two characters, gotten together and be going to IKEA and buying sofas together and cat sitting and stuff, it would have been very, very different, right? So the futures you can't have, are those the most beautiful futures?
I think that our imagination creates fantastic futures. And we have to go with our imagination because there's nothing else. The way I describe it is not IKEA. Because I had a relationship once with a woman who basically wanted me to live with her, and we lived together. And on Sundays, I discovered she did laundry. And she wanted me...
I mean, the horror of it all.
and she wanted me to fold the towels and fold the sheets. And I said, yes, it makes perfect sense if that's what I wanted. But the folding of towels was not romantic.
I think a lot of Indian men would agree with you, yes. Yeah, no, so this, I'm going to quote a little bit more from...
Okay.
I'm going to tell you what you said based on this. Is it that you don't like people, or you grow tired of them and can't for the life of you remember why you found them interesting? Is that what happened to you?
Yes.
Something like that, right?
It is.
And then you write another point of two roommates pretending to have a life together, right? And I think Find Me, both of these are from Find Me, is a much more grown-up perspective
Yes.
on love, isn't
It's
it?
disenchanted and disabused. In other words, all the wonderful fantasies that you have of what will it be like to live with this other person? It's going to be fantastic. We'll have lots of fun. We'll travel. We'll do this or that. And then you find out, oh no, it's the towels and the sheets. And that's what it is. Oh my God. And so there's a kind of dullness that we never factored in an intimate relationship. And that dullness is life.
So I'm born beautifully dull, and I actually preferred Find Me because it seemed very real. Like, for me, it was maybe also I am middle-aged, so that it worked for that. But if you look at the perfection that was in the eyes of the two characters in Call Me By Your Name, they looked at each other, the thoughts they had about each other was of a perfect individual in a sense, right? Or a perfect partner, or a perfect,
Yes.
and in Find Me, like you said, there's a lot more compromise, right?
There's compromise, there's an acceptance of compromise and the expectation of compromise. In other words, no relationship is going to give you what you thought it was going to bring. And in Find Me, there's a realization of that. That does not exist in Call Me By Your Name, which is a story of the perfect love that cannot last.
So, I have 2 young children, and I was just thinking about how much of a factor they play in marriage, right? So
Children?
yes.
It's the best birth control.
Again, not all Indians would agree with you on that. But, in here you wrote in Find Me, after our son left for the States, there was so little between us that it felt his entire childhood was a dress rehearsal for our unavoidable separation. In fact, the characters of Find Me, a lot of them is about their children, sort of, and how they affected
Yes.
their adult relationships, right? And, children change us, they change a marriage. And how do they change love? Like you said, you've answered the question already, right?
The children change love. They do. First of all, because we lose the focus on the other partner. We now focus on children. And that is truer I think, of mothers than it is of fathers. But in fact, the mother is totally devoted to her children. That is an unquestionable fact. And so are parents, fathers nowadays. But in the old world, in the world of the generation of my parents, my mother was totally subservient to the children, and my father was sort of bored. And so he was devoted to work.
Right.
And that's the thing. But in essence, I think that children also function as a bond between the parents. And once the children do not exist with the parents any longer, the bond that they serve to suture two couples,
Yes.
two partners, becomes more flimsy, so that you become aware that, oh my God, with the children gone, there's really very little left between us. And one of the things that has been happening I think in most societies today, at least modern societies, is that there is a sort of a resurgence of how to live together now that we have no more romance between us. How do we continue together? Which is, I think, it's a new wisdom that we have acquired on how to fix a marriage as opposed to let it dissolve completely.
Like you said that people can't focus on each other because of children. And I think after a point, they should focus on each other that much anyway. So it might be a good thing, because the things that, back to what you said, the things that seemed interesting end up being annoying, right? So I think it's quite, but the other part about parenthood here, sorry, I'm going to stick with this, is in Find Me, Elio's father is seen as an individual separate from his son, and he is explored as a person.
Yes.
And very often, I think what happens is that parents are putting on a particular role, so their own identity is completely subservient.
Totally true.
And what I liked about it was the exploration of his personality as a human being and not a father. That is something you got into unusually in the beginning of the book, when everyone expected it about the earlier relationship. You went into something totally different.
Well, yes, because I was very interested in the father, being a father myself.
Yes.
I was interested in what makes a father make a speech like that, or give a speech like that, and where does it come from? And so I wanted to explore who the father was. And so there was only one way to do that, and was to have him have a new relationship, because I didn't know what his relationship with his wife was going to be, or what it was going to reveal about him. So I had him find a new partner, and he meets her on a train, which is something that happened to me. I met somebody on the train once, and of course she got off 3 or 4 stations later, and that was the end of that. There was just a brief conversation, but it made me think. And I wanted to think more about what are the possibilities that life threw at me and that life took back in a second. But I didn't want to give it up, so I wrote a story. And I wrote the story in order to find out who the father is in his mid-50s or maybe early 60s.
His first, second, third, or fourth self, right?
Yes.
At least, I think he was also pretty many selves down. I'm going to go to something totally different that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the discussions on Judaism in your writing, right?
Okay.
There is a sentence that really resonated with me, so I'm gonna read it out. We were not conspicuous Jews. We wore our Judaism as people do everywhere in the world, under the shirt, not hidden but tucked away. Can you tell me a little more about that? Because I think today it's really relevant in the modern world, how we present ourselves, our religion.
It could be our religion, but it could be a host of other things. It is for me a metaphor for what is it that makes each one of us different from the other, or from what we perceived as the total community of which we are an outsider. And so I went to my own experience as a boy growing up as a Jew in Egypt, which initially was very easy. There was no problem. But gradually, because of the situation, I think, in Israel, there was a sense that being a Jew in Egypt was no longer viable. And so
Is that when you left Egypt?
I was kicked out of Egypt eventually, because I don't know why we were kicked out, but we were European, we were whatever you want to call us, and among other reasons, because we were not Egyptian. We had become Italians, and there was a sense of, this is Egypt, we don't want foreigners in our country, which is totally understandable. On the other hand, I learned that I didn't want to tell people that I was Jewish, because I knew it was going to invite trouble, and so I learned to hide it. And that's what I used Judaism as a metaphor for the thing about ourselves that we hide. And the thing that I hide about myself the most, and you will not believe me, is my shyness.
You know, it's odd. I totally understand that, because I talk a lot more because I'm actually very shy.
Yes.
So I'm sure there are other people here who feel like, I actually totally understand that.
My shyness is the thing that gives me away. And I blush very easily. And when
We're all watching you, André. You're blushing now.
I know. You know what it is that I blush. As soon as I say that I'm blushing, I will blush.
You do, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you're blushing again. Yeah.
And it's the thing about me that is, it's the thing, I wish I didn't have to give this away. When I remember when I was a kid and I was meeting a girl, I was 14, 15, 16, and I would talk to her or try to sort of be a bit more forward, I would suddenly blush. And I knew I was blushing. And I knew that the blush told her that I was doing something against my nature. And therefore that everything I was trying to show off was undercut by my blushing. And that's what stood me out of mankind, as it were. Nobody blushes this much. Nobody's this shamed. And I say somewhere else that shame is the thing that has the deepest pockets in us.
And that is why it's a form of control, isn't it?
You have no control with shyness.
No, I'm saying it's
Yes.
it's a way of society controlling you.
Yes, and I'm totally controlled. There's no question.
You're like, I'm totally controlled.
Yeah.
But you know, speaking of people controlling others,
Yeah.
tell me about the female characters in your books. Because I felt there's a very big difference between the women in Call Me By Your Name and Find Me. Did you?
Yes.
Did you?
No, I think that, well, I grew up with very, very strong and very willful women. My grandmother,
Excuse me.
my mother, my aunts, and the friends of my mother these were all women who I loved, and I wanted to be with them. And I had also uncles, and my father was a very strict man, and I always found that the women were far stronger than the men. And so one of the things I did in Call Me By Your Name is that I tried to dilute the character of the women and make them less strong. But in Find Me, I said, come on, these are the women I've known. These are the women that I've made. One of the reasons why I'm in America and I'm not in Europe is because my mother decided, I'm going to America.
It's happening.
Whoever wants to come with us comes. Who doesn't want to come, stay. And my mother was the one who basically launched the family. My wife is extremely strong. She's a lawyer by profession. Okay, and so she is. Basically, she told me, "You're going to finish your dissertation."
It's happening.
Okay, and she said, "This is enough of your sort of trying to find yourself. Finish your dissertation." Oh, okay, fine. I will finish my dissertation, and I finished it in 6
And
months.
you probably thank her now, right?
I always think I am who I am because of her.
You know, but going back to what you just said about the female characters being less assertive in Call Me By Your
Yeah.
Name, why would you do that? Is it to not take away from the main story?
No, it's just that it didn't seem important. The mother is an absent character. She plays bridge, she has friends, and that's about it.
Yes.
I didn't want to focus. It would have been a distraction.
Yes, to focus on...
And so I didn't give her much attention, but I think that Miranda, who is the
Yes.
new girlfriend of the father, is a very strong girl.
Yes.
And she will make advances on him. She will tell him something that I think no man has ever heard before, is that, please don't take a shower.
No, there is one exception to that, I think, in Call Me By Your Name, which is Vimini, the young girl. Did I pronounce that
Oh,
correctly?
Vimini, yes.
Vimini, the young girl who was suffering from cancer and who befriended Olivier.
Yes.
I think that someone like that is fighting a battle, right?
Yes.
So you have a young child fighting the biggest battle, in a sense,
And
of all the women.
She's a strong girl. She's 7 years old, and she is a very good friend of Oliver.
Yes.
And then he helps her walk down the rocks to put her feet in the water. And basically she likes him and he likes her, and she will write to him.
Every day, right?
Yes. And of course eventually something terrible happens to
Yes.
her, but she knows it's going to happen and she tells him.
And she kind of accepts it in a sense,
Yes.
doesn't it? Through the...
She
I mean,
tells
I think pretty much everyone had a crush on Oliver in the book, from what I could tell,
Yes.
right? It was. I don't think there was anybody who was left. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we can. There's another line. Sorry, I'm quoting a lot from the book to give everybody, though I don't have the entire paragraph here. But life is not so original at all. It has uncanny ways of reminding us that even without a God, there is a flash of retrospective brilliance in the way fate plays its cards. It doesn't deal us 52 cards, but 4 or 5. And I don't have the rest of the passage here, but he goes on to say that these cards keep getting dealt through generations. So one generation has an impact on
Right.
the lives of the other. And the two books actually carry on that theme, don't they?
Yes, they do. I think that life is not very inventive. It gives you a certain kind of narrative, and you change parts of the narrative. Your parents changed it for them. Their grandparents also changed it. But by and large, it repeats itself.
And we also get so invested in our baggage that we can't leave it behind,
we
right?
can't, we
It's
can't.
like,
And-
who are we without that?
My father told me, you know, life repeats itself, which is not something that a modern parent would say to the child. Invent your life, go forward, nothing is written. No, my father said, you know, life repeats itself. And guess what? I believe it. And I've said that to my children, so I've poisoned them. But at the same time, I don't think that, I mean, my father left Turkey to go to Egypt, then he left Egypt and went to Italy, then he left Italy and went to France, and then he left France and went to America. I left Egypt, I went to Italy, I went to France, I went to America. God, if that's not the same trajectory, then what is? And it's the same kind of relationships we have, the same philosophy of life. So I think that we are given very few cards.
Yes.
Life is not that inventive. And with the cards that we're given, as I said, 4 or 5 cards, we have to make the best of it.
No, I think that's a great thought to end on, unless we have some questions from anybody. Okay, go for it. Oh, you take this one.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks very much. That was super interesting. So André, I'm sorry, but I have 3 questions for you.
Oh, God.
I've been saving them up. Okay, the first one. So you mentioned in Call Me By Your Name that it's the perfect love that cannot last. But why can it not last? Why did... so you've got Elio and Oliver, but why did Oliver just not... Why did he have to go off and get married into a life that he just doesn't seem very happy about?
Oh, God.
Now, when you answer this question, we'll know that you do know everything.
I think that, put it this way, as I was writing the novel, I knew that something had to happen to not make it the perfect relationship. So the fault is not in the narrative itself or in the characters, but in the author. And why does the author decide that this was not going to last? I have no answer. But it came so naturally to me, automatically, that I had to go with that.
Because their love was so honest and so raw and so real. So I was just, if you share that depth with someone, why can it not last?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't think that love lasts anyway.
Oh, skeptic.
No, it's not skeptic. It's actually experienced. But in a sense, but I do think that love changes. It doesn't go away. It just morphs into some other forms. Mm-hmm. And you have to accept that. It cannot be at the age of 50, 60 what you had when you were 20. There is no way that's going to happen. First of all, you become wiser or stupider. It's up to you. Okay? So you've acquired experience, you've made mistakes. Actually, what I believe also is that you've repeated all the mistakes many times. And we all are willing to accept the fact that we've made mistakes and we can't undo them. So this is what, but automatically as I was writing the novel, and I was writing it, as you know, very fast, I decided that this is not going to go on. It can't go well. Okay. I don't want to see the lovers in my stories fold towels on Sunday night.
Okay, understood. So question number 2, there's a character in your book, Anchize, I'm not sure. Anchize. So he comes across as this kind of dark, mysterious character. Tell me more about him, and what was the kind of meaning of him in your story?
You mean structurally what's purpose he serves in the narrative?
Yes.
Absolutely none. He is basically, I'm sorry. You've asked me a very important question. He is a character, he's the gardener. And he goes fishing. And eventually, you know what, Anchize is the name of the father of Aeneas, who basically dies because Aeneas escapes burning Troy with his father on his shoulder and his son in his arms, and his wife has just died and killed by a Greek. The point is that Anchize doesn't really serve a purpose. But he's the gardener, he's the person who is weird, who is strange, represents old Italy, the Italy that no longer exists in the 1980s. And it's a sort of pre-World War I Italy or pre-World War II Italy. I haven't decided which war we're talking about, okay? But it's an old farmhouse Italy that no longer exists.
Okay.
And I wanted that kind of character to sort of serve a presence, just be present.
Yeah, he was very interesting. Okay, and my final question. So you write with such color about the town, and I think from memory you don't even you don't give it a name. You don't tell us where it is. I think you call it an initial.
Yes.
Why is that, and how did you get such color about the place? Did you live in that town?
Well, okay, this is a big conversation, so I don't want to make it last a long time.
Okay.
But you think that there was a lot of color. You use the word color. Mm-hmm. Actually, I said something about the kind of plants that grow in that area. There is lavender, and there is rosemary, and you have sunflowers. Mm-hmm. And there's a beach, and it's hot. That's all the color I gave you.
So the rest is in my head.
No, but you've cobbled it together in your head, in your imagination, and you've created this amazing landscape, which is called Italy. But it's basically something that you brought. You brought all the postcards, and I've given you so very few details to go on. The smell of coffee rising up in the afternoon as the cooks are making coffee for themselves after having made it for the guests. Okay? That's about it. I was not going to give you all the facts. I expected you to embroider yourself. You didn't know you were doing it, but you were basically invited to. And I think you've also created the love between the characters. I gave you just very, very few incidental details. But I allowed you to, in the rhythm of the prose, and I think the prose is the key. In the rhythm of the prose, you slipped into the rhythm of the prose, and you acquired this whole universe, which was yours, not mine.
Well done.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel like somebody else had their hand up. No? Okay. Yeah.
So, Andre, I mean, just to take forward what you said about being skeptic about love, you said that all relationships are fraught yes. with, I guess, expectations. So, bringing me to something that had come up also earlier, that is it, do you think, in your perspective, it's important that our primary relationship is with ourselves, and if we can get the fragments of ourselves together, we perhaps will have a better shot at a relationship with another, or do we need a relationship with another person?
Well, that's a difficult question, because you're asking me to tell you whether solitude is better than company. And I cannot answer that question, because I haven't decided. I know that it's very hard to be alone. It's unsuitable.
No, I'm talking about investing in another. Companionship, great, but that investment of yourself
in somebody else?
Yes.
Well, that is what the title of the book means, Call Me By Your Name. In other words, I'm giving you my identity, and you are giving me your identity, and we have become, at least for a few seconds, one person together. It's a beautiful fantasy. Does it last? I don't know. I wouldn't even pronounce myself, because I don't have that much experience to go one way or the other. I was beginning to answer by saying that alone is not a good thing, but company sometimes can be unbearable. And so which of the two are you going to choose? You cannot choose. I remember once there was a person in my father's life, a good friend of his, who committed suicide. And I asked him, why did he commit suicide? I was probably 11, 12 years old. And my father said he got married because he didn't want to be alone. And then he found out that in marriage he was probably more alone than when he had been alone. And so he took his own life. That's the kind of story that you never forget. How can you be more alone when you are with someone? is the moral of the tale. And I've lived my whole life trying to figure that out, and I still can't.
Thank you.
And I think we're just out of time now, but thank you so much, Andre.
Thank
It was
you very,
amazing
very
chatting
much.
with you.
Thank you,
Take
thank
care.
you. Thank